Good afternoon. This is the House Appropriations Committee. It is still Thursday, March 13th, 2025. It's a little after 1:45. And we have Emily Byrne and James Duffy from the Joint Fiscal Office to talk about ADS billing. And then after they're done with that, Emily is going to stay in. We're going to talk about some budget things and homework and assignments and stuff for us. So, thank you. Felton, take it away. We should all have a copy of this fiscal document.
Sorry, so for the record, Emily Byrne from the Joint Fiscal Office, and I'm going to do my best to keep quiet during this and let James drive.
Okay.
James Duffy, Fiscal Analyst with the Joint Fiscal Office.
Welcome to both of you.
All right, so thank you for having us here. We're here to walk through an item from the fiscal year 2026 Governor's recommended budget. This particular piece of the 2026 GovRec budget combines two things. I was telling my partner about what I was working on last night. Combines two things that are famously enjoyable and people know lots about: computers and cost accounting methodologies. So there have been some understandable questions about this, this particular item in the FY26 budget.
FIFO.
Yeah, and so we put together this issue brief, which is in front of you all to help clarify any outstanding questions. I know the Agency of Digital Services has also been before the committee and provided testimony on this, but we're here to hopefully clear up any lingering questions, having worked closely with them on compiling this issue brief. So
I'm going to pause you for just a second. I also want to recognize Representative Scott Campbell from Energy and Digital Infrastructure. So he'll pass it back. Yes. ADI. No. EDI. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
So that being said, because there might be a couple questions along the way, given the subject matter, what I'm proposing to do is walk through the various pieces of the issue brief that hopefully lays things out kind of brick by brick, and then culminates in kind of the end answer that we're looking for, which is what is this proposal looking to accomplish? So I'll
15
yes. So So I'll go through kind of each of the bricks, each of the pieces, quick pause for questions before we move on to the next one. So Agency of Digital Services, as I'm sure you all know, is part of the executive branch, provides broad digital and technical support to executive branch departments, agencies, commissions, and because it sort of acts as this executive branch wide IT support function, its appropriations don't always work the same way as they do with other executive branch agencies. The primary funding mechanism for the Agency of Digital Services work isn't a direct appropriation from, say, the general fund, like it would be for some others. Instead, ADS is primarily funded through billing back costs to the agencies and departments that it supports with their IT functions. It does this through the use of what's called an internal service fund, which is called the Communications and Information Technology Fund, the CIT fund. So the CIT fund is really the primary funding source for much of ADS's work. Questions so far? Okay, great. The $15 million transfer that we're here discussing today, which has been proposed for FY26, would be a one-time $15 million transfer to the Communications and Information Technology Fund to help the to facilitate the a change in billing practices at the Agency of Digital Services. So I'll talk quickly about some more detail about the Communications and Information Technology Fund and internal service funds more generally.
James,
Sure.
That fund today, do you know what the balance is?
I do not have that information in front of me today, but I'm happy to get the answer from ADS and get that back to the committee.
It's in deficit.
It is, I will say, with the internal service funds, especially because, and with any special fund, right? Like because of the timing of when, right? You get a bill from ADS for a full year's worth of cost in the fall, and then you transfer all of that revenue to them, but they're spending it over the course of the year. So, right, like we can pull some year-end balances, sort of where it's, you know, that's the best, it's do a snapshot at year-end and sort of see what's going on.
We heard in testimony, deficit, I just don't remember if that was, you know, what it is today versus what it will be after the 15 million.
So all the agencies pay it at one time at the end of the year. It's not prorated in any way, month by month.
I think it depends on what they're buying. So there are some things that are sort of a one-time.
Understood that.
Cost of
I understand that. If they were having a new software package or some new thing built, maybe this would be one time in their budget, as opposed to the services provided and keeping everything running and servicing whatever the reason.
Yeah, I think it's the things like timesheet billing. I don't want to get to it. This is probably for ADS especially, but right, if it's the like timesheet billing where it's, you know, we get a certain amount of services from staff, that sort of gets billed on a more.
The storage, all the storage that they're paying for and that kind of stuff.
I don't know specifically about
So I was
storage.
just wondering if there was might be an easier way for it to flow through the fund, but.
Right, and this is one of the reasons why it gets complicated. The range of services that ADS provides is so broad. Storage, for example, is one of them. And the cost allocation methodologies used, because you have this really diverse range of services and this diverse range of recipients of those services, the way that ADS allocates those costs. And I would imagine also that the payment and the transfer schedules can really vary depending on what use you're talking about and even what entity within the state government you're talking about. So ADS is a wonderful resource for those specific questions because it does get complicated and specific quickly as you start to dial in there. But that's great. All those points kind of anticipate where we're heading next. Yeah, great. So yes, the CIT funds, the purpose of the CIT fund and internal service funds more generally is to help rationally and fairly distribute the costs of services that many departments and agencies across the state government might use. So for example, every state building has Wi-Fi and internet connectivity. Every state employee needs internet connectivity access to do their work, just about, or vast majority of them. So those services need to be distributed in some way across state government. That makes sense. But then there are some other services that are much more specific to the work done by a particular agency or department that it wouldn't make sense to distribute those widely across all of state government, right? One agency, it doesn't necessarily make sense for their direct appropriations to be funding vastly different work or specialized work done by a different agency. So what the Communications and Information Technology Fund does, and this is one of the strengths of Internal Service Fund more broadly, is aids both Agency of Digital Services, which administers the fund, and the state government more holistically to spread those costs out and allocate them in ways that are fair, equitable, respect the work of the agencies, and then also can, take advantage of efficiencies in making use of different federal funding sources. There are connections with how the state leverages federal funds, and achieve greater efficiency in the way these costs are spread out across the different entities of the state government.
I think the only thing I would add is just like really to highlight that sort of the benefit of the internal service fund is to the extent, we have agreements with the federal government to execute programs on their behalf. They understand that you need things like internet connectivity to execute their programs as well. So they will pay their fair share as long, like they look at these mechanisms and say like, yeah, this is a fair distribution of costs across all of state government, right? And they say like, yeah, we will, that's an approved methodology and you can bill the sort of administrative function
To the
federal grant. Yeah, so that's the function. I think there was a time way before my time, right, where a lot of these functions were just general fund paid for, right? And like creating these sort of like, it does create the double count in the budget. It does create these sort of like layers of administration, but it allows that sort of cost sharing amongst all funds, not just state funds.
And also want to highlight that, this arrangement, this model is not specific to the Agency of Digital Services. It's not specific to the CIT fund or even to the state of Vermont specifically. So the use of internal service funds is common across state governments as a cost accounting mechanism. And there are other examples of internal service funds that function in similar ways in the state of Vermont. So work of the individual human resources in the executive branch. Makes use, at least in part, of an internal service fund to fund those human resource services that are provided by DHR to different entities across the executive branch. So dialing in a little bit on the specifics of the CIT fund and how ADS uses it. As I mentioned earlier, depending on what agency or department you're talking about, the specific work being done by that agency or department, you really have to come up with specific strategies to allocate those costs for those IT services, depending on the nature of the work. So the CIT fund and ADS uses a variety of different cost accounting mechanisms to spread out the costs of the services it provides, right? So you can think about ADS providing desktop support to executive branch employees across the different agencies, assisting agencies or departments with hardware purchases or software procurement. These are all things that ADS provides that might follow different cost allocation strategies. The two broadest categories of cost allocation strategies that ADS uses are core enterprise solutions, but just think of that as the foundations of IT in state government. These are really, really basic foundational services, like I mentioned earlier, of internet connectivity for all state buildings, things that are used universally and make sense to charge kind of on a even per head count basis across all entities in the government. So it's the first one. And then the second broad category here is demand. So these are cost allocation strategies that are driven by the specific demand that an agency or department is contributing to ADS's workload. So these are cost allocation strategies that might be based on the amount of hours your agency bills to ADS for tech support, as measured through timesheets, or the number of, let's say, hours spent by ADS negotiating a contract or running a procurement process for a bespoke software that your agency uses. So those core enterprise solutions are cost allocation strategies that spread things equally across state government, and demand are cost allocation strategies that are much more based on like a per unit load of what an agency or department is demanding of ADS. We're getting close to the 15 million question before us. So what the proposed $15 million transfer to ADS, one-time transfer to ADS for 2026 would accomplish is moving a suite of services provided by ADS from demand to core enterprise services. The reason ADS is looking to do this is that there's a subset of demand-driven costs which are billed in arrears through the CIT fund. What that means is they are paid for not the year that they're used, but the year after. So let's say your agency needs Salesforce or Microsoft licenses in fiscal year 26. In a billing in arrears strategy, those costs aren't paid for until the following fiscal year. So in fiscal year 24, you're paying for fiscal year 23's cost. In fiscal year 25, you're paying for fiscal year 24's cost. ADS is looking to move away from billing arrears strategies as much as possible. They raise a variety of kind of risks and accounting problems and complications. They're harder to track, for one. They're not as transparent or obvious to folks looking to understand agency budgets. They're just not as straightforward from a cost accounting point of view. In general, it's preferable to pay for services and items the year in which they're used to help keep track of costs. But then most importantly, and I think this is the biggest risk with billing and arrears strategies that ADS is looking to address, is especially in the IT world where there's been a lot of cost increases in recent years, costs have become harder to predict for IT services and products. Billing and arrears really makes it hard to put together an accurate budget a year in advance. If you're putting together a budget for IT services at the beginning of fiscal year 26, but you're not going to pay for those until fiscal year 27, well, come fiscal year 27 and you're paying for fiscal year 26, over that year, costs may have gone up. There could have been cost overruns, costs may have changed, your provider or vendor, the contract might not have been executed in the way you thought. it's difficult to predict costs that you're going to incur a year in advance. And that's how you end up in situations that were mentioned earlier where, ADS is chronically having to deficit spend to cover necessary costs and to then address those deficits through the annual budget adjustment process or other disruptive kind of adjustments to the way they provide their services. So what ADS is proposing to do with this $15 million one-time transfer is to facilitate the moving of about $15 million of costs from a demand-driven in arrears cost allocation strategy to something where they're paying through the CES cost allocation strategy in the year that those services are actually used. I'll stop there because that was a lot of talking. Any questions so far?
can I have one more thing? And I think like the reality is that if you move it to this sort of more, right, paying for it in the year that you're incurring it methodology, right, it means that there's going to be 2 years of cost at some point, right? And so what this is really doing is addressing the sort of like, we got to pay for it twice, right, to catch us up at some point. So this $15 million sort of helps pay for it twice, right? And it means it's not billed back to the department specifically. It's just sort of like, we will deal with it, in a one-time shot with this money. And then going forward, it will continue to move through its existing cycle, but it wouldn't, otherwise departments would get double billed in 1 year and then
So there's,
budgets go up and then come back down. So this is just taking care of it.
they'll eat it here in ADS, basically.
Why 15 million? Why not 18 million, 12 million? I mean, how is the 15 calculated, or is that just happened to be what was still available when they were going through their budget?
So I think in talking with ADS and looking through it, I think our work has found that 15 million is about the right number in terms of dealing with this. We can go back and have some further conversations with them in terms of what if it was.
I'm always suspect with nice round numbers.
Totally. But it's a funny thing. I'm always a suspect to people who go all the way to the dollar on a $15 million thing, because like nobody's that good. Right? Like nobody's that good. I'm like, I can't budget that accurately. Like I've been doing this forever. Like nobody's anyway. But yeah, and we can go back and because I think it is a fair question of like, well, what if it was 10, right? Like, what is the sort of,
I raised a question when Commissioner Farrell was in the House. And he said, there's 9.1 billion for this infrastructure, and we said, why 9.1? Because that's what was left over.
Right.
I think this
He would
is.
say more if it was more was available, but that's what was left.
This is very much where 15 million aligns with sort of the cost of Microsoft Offices and Office Lights, it says, and these sort of, right? Microsoft Office is probably the best example because everybody needs an email address, right? And you can either sort of go through administratively and say, go through all 8,000 people in state government and figure out which department owns it, or to sort of say, there's 8,000 people, the Microsoft licenses cost X divided by 8,000, and this is your share of it, right? Like, I think that's what drove what that number is, not a.
So I'm probably asking the same question, maybe just a little different way. So essentially going from a system that pays after the fact to a system that is more real time. And the question then is this 15 million, if you're paying after that, is that enough to fill that hole? What is that real hole to get you to the current point? See what I'm saying?
To get everything current, as
To get
opposed to
it
just,
I'm suggesting, is this a drop in the bucket, or this get you almost there, or this gets you all the way there to a new system that will keep it current?
So
No, it's good. Yeah, it's not.
Oh.
Probably it's not.
okay, introduce yourself and.
Yeah, John Kelly, Zach. So the 15 million is probably about half what we need. So we're looking at like a 2-3 year process. Like 15 million, which is sort of identified with financial management that like, this is a number that we could probably get this year. But it's really probably about half.
So you think you'll be coming back, or do you have a mechanism for catching up along the way?
So both, like, so we'll be able to start next year's budget with a new model. We'll help break down some of that. And then we'll have to see what's left over. But yeah, probably a realistic number is probably about 30 million to catch up.
And I think in some of the conversations we had with ADS, right? So like, it was a new agency, there was a lot of moving of things around and shuffling and kind of getting like settled, right? And they've sort of transitioned to this new sort of maturity level. Where they're, you know, like, okay, we've been doing this for a little while and here's what works and here's what doesn't and here's what we could do better. Like there's sort of that natural progression of things that happens when you have a new agency.
John, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a little bit of a follow-up, just
Yeah.
kind of curious about the calendar of things. I mean, we're kind of doing this much here, looking at this here today, and then they have to happen in the future, kind of get to a point. Doing this, in this way, right, yes.
Yeah, well, Lauren,
Sorry, that's a question for you.
yeah, sorry. You know, lowering the demand will help. The rates, we're gonna have to look at our rates, because right now, what we can charge is well under what we actually pay our employees. Our rates haven't changed since we started in 2017, they've been the same, even though wages have gone up. You know, everything else licenses, right, exactly, so that's what's kind of driving the deficit. Is that we just, our employees are making more than we can actually charge back. So that will be addressed in the other second phase, but it's maybe the rates to help regain some of that. And then we'll see on that for more, or maybe it can be just adjusted.
So the first phase, yeah, and like year, phase two, with better idea what that looks like.
Yeah, we'll have that. I think this will help. 50 million really for the agencies, the departments, it's sort of like a subsidizing without, but otherwise they're gonna get pretty hard, right? Like, so it's gonna be trying to pull that money forward. It's gonna be double counting, like.
So I'm gonna grab Campbell and then with my.
Scott Campbell from the Committee of Energy and Digital Infrastructure. So this build out is what causes the big numbers and the budget adjustment also, right? From other agencies and departments that will have to pay this money for what they didn't budget because it's in the news. So what was the total of that impact on the budget adjustment? See what you see. The amount that agencies bill required.
Was that the other 2.5 million increase?
It was.
But that was the increase, not the total amount.
12, staying right on, something like that. 12 million.
I'd say it was that one. I remember one line item, the page, it was most of it was about 3.
Yeah, sometimes.
That's what that is.
I guess, just trying to understand how this works, because if the 15 million is about half of what would really be needed overall, so that would get you halfway through the year, would then agencies' budgets be hit because they would start paying in advance, or does the fund go in negative?
You want to take it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been thinking of it in, John, maybe you can, if this is a good analogy, or if it's not one, you let me. So if I pay my cell phone bill on the 30th of the month, but I want to switch to paying it on the 1st of the month, I need enough liquidity in my bank account to at least at one point in time pay both the bill on the 30th and the bill on the 1st. What this represents is giving agencies enough liquidity to make that one-time double payment in a short period of time, and then stick to that new schedule of paying on the 1st. Going forward.
Right, but I think your question, right, is
If it's only half.
this is only half, and this is only trying to address part of the things that are in the service level agreement function, right? So there's the Microsoft, I think this is really like Microsoft Office licenses, Salesforce licenses, but there are other services that ADS provides that they are not going, that they're going to continue to bill the way that they've historically billed. And there's more, I think there's more in talking with finance and management and sort of looking at it ourselves, right? Like the Microsoft Office licenses, for example, are pretty straightforward, right? Like everybody has an email address, whatever. But when they go to change the way this is allocated, there is a possibility that there's one way to do the math and there's a new way to do the math, and that the impact on the departments may not be the same, right? And so there will need to be adjustments to department spaces to make sure that they have enough money to cover the sort of change in the billing methodology. And sort of as you peel back the onion and do different, okay, so this function that ADS provides is built this way. If we're going to change the billing methodology, sort of what is the overall impact, right? And it may be and what, finance and management wants to pay attention to, what we want to pay attention to is what is the shift, right? We all of a sudden shift from a department that has, if it's based on headcount or something, or some other methodology, right? That's different. This department that has a lot of federal funds was paying a lot of it under this methodology, but if we pick a new methodology that suddenly shifts it to state funds, maybe we don't want to change that methodology as much, right? So there's going to be that sort of back and forth in terms of budgetary pressures and what funding streams get used as sort of each function gets looked at.
Okay, so that's helpful. So if, just as an example, if less money than 15 million is provided, it might mean that just less functions would be able to be transitioned this year.
I think so, or only part of the yeah.
Right, that's sort of my question. So what if we did half?
We can find out what.
That would be great. What if we did half? What if we did 10 instead of 15? We look at the silver cushions
So
now.
I have in my notes, John,
We'll get to you.
help me, but $12 million deficit in that fund right now. Yeah, probably the same way.
And that would be accounting for if we got this 15. We'd be looking at 12 million.
It'd be a 12-month deficit after the 15.
It's only covering half.
Yeah. Okay, wait.
So the way this is work, shouldn't be working, if we give it 15 million. EAA request across all agencies for budget adjustment should decrease. If we apply this 15 million, the next year's BAA should be down significantly. Whether exactly that much or not, what exactly half or not, I don't know. But we should be able to track success or failure by how much BAA is requested, right?
Yeah, I think the hope, right, would be that this year, I pulled it up, there was about $2.1 million of service level agreement changes in the Budget Adjustment Act. I think with this change and sort of that billing methodology change, the hope would be that would not recur in future budget adjustments.
So we could, yeah. So there's also a budget adjustment.
Yeah, and that budget adjustment, right, that's looking back to prior bills. It wasn't, this trying.
That was, but what I'm saying is if we didn't do 15 million as
Oh,
of
yeah.
July 1st, we could do some amount now and then have budget adjustment, do some additional amount another time. This sort of reminds me, Wayne, of the veterans home, right? Because we were 2 years behind, they were using budget adjust. So this year's an expensive year because we're trying to do the 30th and the 1st to get repaid. So this is another one of those, John.
So we'll see this again if the
We may.
shore up whatever.
We may
might
not. I
still be
mean,
there
if we
or
don't do
not.
15 million and we choose to do less because we have other
Right.
pressing needs, we can see maybe the rest of the 15 million show up in the eighth.
Exactly.
The next time around.
But the total
Right,
BAA should drop down because this is taken care of
Correct.
upfront, right? And so as that proceeds through time, it should be down to almost zero BAA because it will be all taken care of upfront.
No, not quite, because we're still billing in arrears for a big chunk of
Right.
demand. And we're billing at rates below their actual cost. So until that's fixed, it's a couple different things, but, it's a couple of years to get out of it.
Right. That's why I asked the question about the accounting is a little bit off by a lot.
I think that's right. There are multiple forces driving these kind of routine annual deficits. And what this proposed transfer would do is take a bite out of the apple of one of those drivers. But it will be a multi-year strategy of addressing all those drivers.
Right, because right now, we're just talking about the service level of agreement part. We're not talking about the other two areas.
Yeah.
Which I assume will continue as they are.
And which two areas were those? The
Current
CES.
CES and the current demand that's not SLA. How do you like that?
There are, ADS is pursuing, I think, in our conversation with them, as I understand it, multi-year strategy to rationalize and find efficiencies. I think there are still changes going on in terms of their planned, in terms of what things might also get billed to CES going forward. There's kind of a shuffling around of what cost allocation methods are used for which services. So there will be others. This isn't the only one. But yes, this is moving, as John said, about half of things that are currently billed to SLA that's billing in arrears to CES.
So is the ultimate goal more accurate costing, money savings, fewer people, better service to Vermonters? I mean, what's the ultimate goal of doing all this, spending all this money? Or do I have to ask John?
I think you said all. First, it's customer service, it's servicing Vermonters, being transparent, making our accounting easier for people to understand. And just, it's really about transparency, efficiency, and.
Will costs go down or will the cost per event? Yes.
Yes, fast, because you can't control the cost, it's hard to control when you're billing the whole year.
You're paying 23 prices for 26 actual costs or whatever, right?
Exactly.
That's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Okay.
And I would say we're not able to leverage a lot of the like enterprise level, costs that we would get from these large providers. Because a lot of times what happens is we do get the platform. It's charged to the first agency that user and they get a huge bill.
Yeah.
And then from there, we can never actually get it to spread out to other agencies because the cost's so loaded up front.
Yeah.
That it just never works. And so we're not able to get those efficiencies of the economies of scale.
Right. It scared me too if I was the second one.
I think too, there's administrative savings, right, from the current methodology where you're sort of going through every single episode. Did that person use that thing? Did that person use that thing? Versus like, you have this many people, this was the bill statewide, this is your share.
Job B sounds like more fun than job A if you're actually the person doing the work too.
Having done job A, I can agree.
Yeah. Dave?
Well, I was just wondering, won't this put more pressure on our departments? If they've been paying 23 prices for 26 costs, and all of a sudden they're paying 26 for 26, wouldn't they be paying more? And we heard, every department many of the departments that come in before us, there's a big ADS number. Am I missing something?
I don't know, Jim and maybe I'm like.
I think they. You might be partially correct on that, but we're only kidding ourselves. If you're billing at $10, every time it costs you $15, that deficit in that fund is going to continue to grow. So we're borrowing money and we'll just,
Yeah, I
it's
can
just
see that.
gonna escalate. Someday you gotta pay the piper.
Yes. When? No.
Someday is over.
Yeah, pressure's now.
So. Everybody clear as mud, or you'll have more questions, more things you want to think about? So you'll help us figure out some of those questions we've asked about what if we do it slightly differently then. Any other questions? Scott, you're good. Any questions for now? Anybody else wait?
I guess, I don't know, we need it now, but for future, it'd be nice to have a good assessment of some of cost savings that might be accrued, shifting this over. Some estimate of the amount of costs that we could save. Hopefully it doesn't cost us more. Hopefully it's the cost savings, right?
Yes, go ahead. So last word.
So we currently do track cost savings in the way, so that will definitely be, we're putting together the core services right now and the metrics we're gonna use, and that's certainly gonna be something that we're gonna track.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you both very much. James, you're free to go. Emily is staying on. We're gonna shift gears to, you have a question?
No, it's more of a comment, and actually, congratulations. Emily is number two.
This is our transition conversation.
And last year's. And it's division for the. It was a little hard for me to congratulate you last year, but I would like to offer my congratulations. Being number two.
Wow.
Thank you.
And she has good family members.
Yeah, I would have to go to Connecticut this weekend, and my cousin and my uncle, I will see my cousin and my uncle who are going to the Big East tournament tonight and tomorrow.
Really?
And then I think I will still be at their house on Sunday afternoon, which it's a double-edged sword, right? Like they know a lot about it, they got a lot of input and like maybe too much, right? Like
Yeah.
they may have like too many opinions and it may blow the whole thing up, right? Like sometimes you don't want all their expertise. So I'm gonna have to figure out.
Mom is really good at this last year. So he's got great genes, genetics for these things, so it's.
We'll see. Although you can't, I made a mistake last year of somehow doing well.
Well, years ago, I actually did really well, and last year I was, so I was right there with Ben, I was probably way below him. So, I asked Emily to stay, we talked a little bit yesterday about how do we dig into the budgets a little bit more. And I also, thanks to help from lots of good people who are smarter than me, we are going to do some more digging to see about if there are places that we can find money that we can use in other places. Because you've seen how tight everything is. And we have some really important things that we need to address. Our healthcare system is on the brink, for one thing. And the switch from one care going away, we've got primary cares and other places that have a lot of problems. This isn't the only place. There are other fragile systems around the state. We have other needs. This is not everybody here, a bunch of people here have been here since before COVID. But if you haven't been, you're used to having lots of federal funds. There's a whole audience out there I'm talking to too, but we're back to trying to be sort of normal, but plus we've got the chaos of Washington on top of everything. So it's not a normal year in a lot of ways, but we don't have the hundreds of millions of federal funds and all these things. So it's helping this entire body shift its mindset from, it's okay, we have all this money, to, well, now we don't, and so how are we going to do things? So we want to do some more scrutinizing of the budgets that have come to us. And I know we've tentatively closed things. I'm going to ask to have you go back and look through some of these things again. And Emily will help us walk through and figure out how to look at some of these things more deeply than we have done. And before you go tomorrow, I'm going to give you all an assignment to do about finding money and where you want to spend money, so that we all kind of are engaged in making these decisions as a committee. And Marie is going to be helping us with this too. So that's a broad picture of what we're doing, but we'll get into the detail now. So Emily, do we want to go into we have your spreadsheet that you gave us yesterday. I think it's the purple one.
Purple spreadsheet
Yesterday.
from yesterday.
I know, we saw yesterday.
I know I saw it someplace.
So Emily gave us two spreadsheets, right? They're both two-sided. And so the one that's purple at the top And blue underneath it, it says base appropriations is. And the total at the bottom of that is $60 million. So Emily, do you want to, now that we have it, just remind us how you picked these numbers and where they came from?
Before I do that, you want me to share it?
Yes, please.
1 second.
These are two. Yeah, this one, so I think we'll go, start with.
It's not good.
Yeah.
We hope it gets this out so I can find it.
Yeah, I gotta get into the Zoom meeting and blah, 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 so. Right. They're the one with purple at the top, the base summary.
Yeah.
So these line items primarily came from two places. So they came from both the governor's budget summary, right? So items that the administration flagged as sort of new asks in the base budget, or sort of new changes that are different from sort of base, we would normally call like, you know, the status quo operations of state government. So different changes to, you know, what's being invested in, changes in what funding is needed in certain places with caseload savings, or, you know, with the JTOC transfer, you know, changing the new funding streams. But these are really sort of like the other place that we got this is Maria and I, shouldn't take credit for it at all because Maria did all the work. But Maria went through and, you know, combed through the ups and downs and sort of grabbed where there are things that didn't look, you know, that weren't fee per space increases or salary increases, right? Those are sort of what they are. These are those things that are different, right? New grants, new equipment, caseload savings, a 3% increase, those sorts of things that are new and different compared to the FY25 budget. Sort of how I would think of them. I think it would be, you know, going back to the ups and downs for your individual departments and seeing if you agree with sort of what we have characterized. And there may be pieces of budgets in the ups and downs or through your conversations with agencies and departments that, you know, warrant being characterized as sort of new and different from the ongoing operations of state government.
So what if we went, just so we can go through an example, can we go to the ACCD budget? There's the B801, go actually into the Vantage report, the ups and downs.
I think so, if I can find it. It's a good like exercise for me.
That's good, because what I'm going to do is ask all of you to go back and look at your ups and downs of your budget areas, regardless of whether you temporarily close this, whether you temporarily close or not. And see, I started going through a few on my own. And so, for example, the agency of administration, I think everything was, you know, salary, benefits, ADS, you know, so those aren't things we're talking about. I'm picking ACCD because we can show up here on the screen, like, here's some things to look for. You know, so what are things that are potentially optional? There is a new program. You know, it's not part of the normal base. And if it's not on this list and you think it's not part of the normal base, I want you to make a note of it and let Maria know, and she'll keep track of all of these things. So I'm trying to use an example of one that's on here, so you can see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, so here's an example. So- Hmm?
How did you pick these items?
How did I pick these items? So they were either in the governor's budget as called out as specific new items, so in the budget summary book. Or through Maria going through the ups and downs and flagging that this feels new and, like this appears new and different to us. But you should obviously go look at it yourself.
So just following up with Jim's question, I'm going to a different number here and look at E600, 601, 606. Those are just for those 3% increase. We should go back and look at that.
Yeah.
Because that just might be
It's,
usual increase for.
well, it's, that's what you want to look at. It may or may, yes, you want to take a look at the ups and downs. So we'll go to ACCD when Emily can pull that one up, and then we'll go to we'll go to UVM. Take
I
a
don't
look.
have enough information for you. I mean.
You don't
this afternoon.
need to, you just need to, I want you to all just sort of look at it, this was maybe a different eye than we've been looking at the ups and
I'm
downs.
confused about what we're doing.
Emily, are you stuck?
No. Oh, no, you know what?
I'm hoping.
This is good, because it's only sharing Adobe, which is good, okay, so I can look at stuff so you don't see what I'm looking at.
So I would.
I'm not scrambling around the internet trying to find.
Joint fiscal office, the budget things, and then, I'm going to commerce and community development.
If I share, so yeah, so we go to commerce and community development. Oh, no, wait, first I'm gonna go back to this sheet I started with. If we go to. Maybe this isn't a good example that I've found on the fly.
There's, says new base right on it.
Yep,
Yeah, so if you go in, and I should look at. So in some of these, what's also different is some of the ways that the governor's office categorize them, how we've categorized them aren't exact 100% perfect, so we may need to do a little bit more.
that's okay, so if you could go to, B800. And then we'll do 801 also, so. There isn't any. Oh, is it 801? No, that's on I'm not looking on this list, I'm looking in see the ups and downs?
Right, so this one is in 801, but you have the VHIP and the MHIR grant.
That's not the one I'm looking at. If you can, I'm looking at the one that is ACCD administration ups and downs. Nope, you didn't. Sorry, there's too many. That one. Okay, so if you can make that bigger. Okay, so at the top it says ACCD administration ups and downs. And you see all the brown stuff is salaries, wages, health insurance, payroll, vacancy turnover. They only have $360 in that. Anyway, the brown stuff is what it is. So that's not what I'm asking you to look at. What I'm asking you to look at is the other one. So we have new funding for Dun & Bradstreet, 50-50 split with DOL, 35,000. New base money for economic analysis work. The governor's office allocated charge. No idea. Okay, and then doesn't matter. A lot of not much adds up to something. EB5 annual integrity fee, I don't know, maybe we really have to do that. So increase to Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund annual grant. Is this yours, Tom?
Yep.
Okay.
And yep, so some of and looking very quickly on these, right, not all of these are necessarily on our sheet.
Right.
If you want them to be, let's add them in. We can make that sheet.
So
Somebody
what
was
I'm
like,
trying
this
to
is a
do
short sheet.
create the list of things that are potentially optional from everywhere we've got. And I'm not gonna worry about
Actually, fixed cost.
we're not doing the fixed cost. So in this case, I would be looking at those three things at the top, at least, Tom.
Yeah.
And letting Maria know, so she'll add them. So Maria's gonna be the keeper of the long list. So, is that okay, Maria?
That is so great.
Okay. I really appreciate it. I think Maria's done this a few years in the past, so I think she's got this down somewhere. And so even if you love it, and, you know, if it's not $20, you know, have it be put on this list, because we're gonna all take a look at all of these things on this list together, just like I did the big spreadsheet of all the asks. We're now gonna look at these things too, because these are asks also. Yeah. Lynn?
Yeah, looking at that, 801,
Yeah.
and there's all those things that you listed, but here under 801, it says International Business Development Office 0.35, that's,
We haven't gotten to that one yet. This is not 801, this is 800. 800 is not showing on your spreadsheet. Administrative ups and downs is
Okay.
B 800. So if we go down further in this budget presentation,
we'll see
the
801.
next one is tourism.
Development.
The next one is tourism.
I don't have any numbers on here.
They didn't put numbers on here.
No. You have to go to, that's the one that's Joan, goes
So
to.
who has tourism? Tom has tourism. Can you keep it on?
It's on the economic development. Economic development is.
Right. The GROW grants for $350,000. Because it's not everybody looking at this, and they can at least see it on the screen. I realize when you're looking at behind me at the screen, it's not about, I'm catching on.
Not quickly, I know what you're doing, but I haven't quickly found the sheet.
That's okay. We can, this one isn't yours anyway. I'm trying to go through it so people know for their own areas to go through and look at the same thing. So the GROW grants would go on the sheet.
Mhm.
The service level of agreement net changes, even though it's in white, would not go on the sheet. Okay.
Right, and we're not there may be some that we missed or some that, you know, in our judgment, we were like, this seems fine, but you may not agree, and then let's put it on the sheet.
So, you know, and then we'll be asking ourselves, I don't even remember what the GROW grants are. Are the GROW grants more important than this other program that's here? So we're gonna look at it all instead of in silos of each of the divisions. So I'm going down to the next one, which is Department of Economic Development. And there we have new funding, international business development, 305,000. Lynn, that's that.
Yeah.
That's the number.
That's gonna be a question.
That's gonna be a question. And then down below is also new funding, international business development for 45,000.
That's it's 0.35 is the 350.
Right, the two of them are 350,000. Now that, in that case, Emily has that on the sheet. So you don't need to tell that to Maria. Or if you do, she'll just say it's already on the sheet.
But you got those ADS service agreements all stuck in. there.
Right, and they've got to stay there.
Yeah, so those are.
Those are not optional at this point. We're looking at anything that could potentially, and we're only looking at general fund. Right, for this, Emily? Or should we be looking somewhere else?
I mean, I would, it's to the extent special funds are, you know, very much under the purview of the legislature, right? Federal funds are what they are, right?
Right.
But in terms of what a department anticipates to spend, but special
that's
funds
true.
similarly, right? Like, what
So-
special funds are you using? What do the balances look like in those special funds?
That's a good point. So in this case, Tom, rural industrial development grants are 2.5 million. That's an increase of 2.5 million. I'm not sure what's, no, it's special fund. It's special fund.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure, Doug.
So I'm just looking at the screen here, because I don't have it in front of me here, but it says new funding, international business development, 305,000. And then down below it says new funding, international business development, again, 45,000.
And that's just breaking it up between
Breaking it up between.
what's in personal services costs and what's in operating costs. If you recall the budget, there's always 3 lines.
Right, but which is which, because they're in the same column.
That's true. I'm guessing because it's above this operating line. This 305 is the
You see
personal services piece.
services brown line up at the bottom, at the very top?
Yeah.
Or,
Yes, I
and so
do.
that's, all of that's under there, and then the others are under operating. So maybe the operating is related to rent, making this up, as opposed to people.
So we have to go back.
You have to look
What
at
is
both
that
of them
for?
together.
Because you're not indicating on these.
in this case,
Rent or it's probably something like.
right, and it may not matter, at this moment, we want to pull them out, so we have it, so in this case, Maria's got it, but, because it's on Emily's sheet. But you'd pull them both out. And in this case, I would be checking into that 2.5 million for the rural industrial development grants. We could keep a special fund list about that, and I see Lynn has a question.
Yes, well, I think that the International Business Development Office is the one in Canada that has been there for a while. But I suspect that new funding means it's either now in the base or it was ARPA or something.
What they said was they want to expand to Europe.
Yeah, oh, okay, yeah. okay.
Yes.
It's Europe. Got it.
So we're not going to answer the question of, do we like it right now?
No.
Right now, we're simply doing the exercise of, let's pull all of these out and see what the wish list, this is like the governor's wish list. Okay. So we want to see the universe of what that is. And not in silos.
Base.
Yes. The one time we have access to it, we have access to the one time already.
And
So-
so 2.5, you're saying these are under the grants catalog, the grants.
Well, it's under special funds, and I don't have any idea what that is.
Could be federal money.
No, it's not.
Oh, it's
Because
okay.
federal fund is a different line. The column, it's general fund, special fund, federal fund, interdepartmental transfer.
You get money for something.
So that would be worth pursuing finding, because that's $2.5 million. Yeah. So that's Department of Economic Development. Let's just finish going through ACCD here. DHCD ups and downs. Tip, this one's yours, right?
I'm looking at it right now, and there are some new positions that are, that don't appear on this list, but that, are in ups and downs for that, to their replacing limited service positions for VHIP and for loan.
Right. So those you would pull out and put on the list if they weren't already on the list.
Yeah. And they might, I have to look at our sheet again, right? But there's
I don't see them on your list.
the VHIP line item.
Yeah, there's a one.
And so that.
Yeah, which is 4.3, but I'm not seeing the 4. Oh, it's the next page.
The next page has 6 for VHIP and MHIR. So I think if you take 4 of the 6 and the 300 up above is how you get the 4.3.
Right.
And then same for MHIR, the 150.
Okay, all
So
right.
those are both, so they're both on,
But I think putting a notation in that it's 300,000
Yeah.
for 2 permanent positions and the balance is for the grant program would be helpful.
right. And so up above that, Tiff, is HP sites net operating changes. I don't have any idea.
It's
what that-
federal money.
No, it's for general.
NPS, HBNPS. No.
The thing I'm looking at. No, I'm looking at a different page. Wait. No. No, I'm not looking at those. I'm looking up higher. Under ADS service level of agreement, we have HP sites net operating changes. 51,000.
Historic preservation.
Here, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
And then 72,000 for miscellaneous changes to operating. That's hazy.
And that's where I think the Vantage reports can be helpful and conversations with those agencies and departments, right? There are just, you could put every computers cost $12 more and pencils are negative $8 and you could do that a million
Right.
times or sort of.
So one of your assignments is to go through your ups and downs and pull these things out. If they aren't already on Emily's list, talk to Emily if you're not sure. Talk to Maria if you're not sure, but get that list to Maria, please.
And I think the one that I will call out, which, you know, is always a tricky one on how to deal with, right? Is this AHS global commitment match? Because the B301 appropriation is the match for all of the movement within the global commitment fund within the Agency of Human Services. So what we tried to do is look at, I think if you look at the ups and downs, it's closer to a $30 million or north of $30 million general fund match for global commitment, but this says only 29 because we tried to pull the couple pieces that are more look like new investments or changes, right, for this conversation. Whereas, right, caseload and utilization at Diva is caseload and utilization at Diva, right? So we didn't call it out specifically. We can call all of those out if you want to see sort of where the movement is within each area of AHS. But for now, it's sort of like all of those sort of base ongoing, changes that we don't really control. They just sort of are, they're the consensus, adopted estimates. Those are sort of embedded in that.
So that may be kind of what it needs to be.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk with the AHS point people.
Yeah, and that'd be Dave and then,
Right.
and Tiff wouldn't have any global. Tiff
It only
might,
gets,
but
it only gets applicable if they take away federal money.
Yes, that's a different.
So,
Yeah.
so is this clear? Can you all go through your
Yeah.
ups and downs for your assignments? And then if there's anything that's not on this list, tell, no matter how much you like it, it's going on the wish list. Okay, so that was part one. And then part two is Emily and I talked about really trying to look at the grants and the Vantage report, which doesn't always work. We tried yesterday and it just kind of had grants roll up, but I think Emily found an example of a place where you could get that information. It may still not be possible in all of your areas, but where it is possible, you should go look and see if it's possible.
Suspicious.
How do we get there?
So you may have to actually go back and ask some of your folks, and that could just be a phone call or an email and ask them. Do that again. The grants?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're gonna, okay, Emily's gonna show us
Reference some report.
the Vantage report. Those are the budget reports we looked at. Emily walked us through yesterday.
I missed that part, sorry.
Okay, you have to stay extra. So, all right, so here you go. We're on the JFO website and
Yep.
on the budget.
If you go to appropriations and budget, so that's the second one down, under primary subjects, and then this second link, FY 26 Governor's Recommended Budget Book, will take you to the summary of sort of all of the budget system reports that the Finance and Management produces, but it includes the judiciary and the legislature. JFO website. Aaron sent the link around yesterday.
And then you go to
And budget.
appropriation. No, go to FY 26 budget.
FY 20.
Budget, all right.
Thank you. Your second one down is that huge thing with the arrow going down.
But I think Aaron,
Yeah.
I think Aaron sent the link around yesterday, and we can send, I can send a file path for,
Right.
to get to it.
So now you can see everybody's by, ASO,
Appropriations.
was it human services we were talking about? Grants?
I think we were looking at human services and we looked at fish and wildlife a little bit. I
Oh,
can,
fish and wildlife. Let's do fish and wildlife. But I think you thought you found some actual grants.
yeah. So this is a good short one. So if you're looking for minutia, it's a good, to kind of look through all, there's a lot of good information in these, but if you go to the grants out inventory is where you'll find the,
I'm sorry, Emily, I missed where you.
So go-
Playing a little fast.
oh, sorry,
I can't really see on the screen there. So,
sorry.
So-
fish and wildlife, okay.
Yeah.
And then there's two choices under fish and wildlife.
Resources, we gotta put the.
Yeah, so you go into fish and wildlife,
And then you see
And then-
there's two choices on there.
you're gonna go into the, keep going into the folder.
It says F&W support and field services. We don't care about the narrative. We're looking at the numbers.
Although there could be good things in the narrative.
Yes, there could
You
be.
never know. It's good
Let's
to read
start
some
with
of
the
the numbers.
numbers. This is the fourth one down.
Yes, the grants out inventory.
Thank you.
And
So now you'll notice that some of those are fish and wildlife federal pass-through grants, which means that's federal money.
where does it say pass-through on there?
So the second one from the bottom.
Oh, yes, federal pass-through grants. So that is not one you're going to spend a lot of time looking at.
And next, the bottom one down there too is matching share of federal grants.
Right. and then one up above it, so the bottom three. And then the other three, so there's fish and wildlife grants related to waterfowl
Yes, we were-
for $10,000.
And this is
Can we tell how long they've been around?
Not from here. I mean, you could go back into these reports,
Okay, no, good one.
sort of see that. I think it's a good question for the, agencies and departments in terms of, like how long have they been around? What was the origin of this grant, right? Like it may have been, who knows what it was.
Some commissioner 10 years ago really loved this and the program's still here and nobody's doing anything with it.
But also remember that some of this may be special funds, because the Fish and Wildlife Fund, all the licenses sold, it's a special fund. So it may not be general fund money involved, or just like. It's not necessarily-
But maybe
I'm
they
not
need
saying
to,
spring
maybe they shouldn't be giving, do they still need to give out these grants? They're operating in deficit. Are these grants,
We're backfilling it with them.
and we're back to the general fund when they maybe don't need to give out the grant? These are the questions we should be asking. I'm not,
Exactly the questions.
right.
Right, so in this example here, we see where it says TBD, so to be determined, so it sounds like we have the grants, but nothing's been.
That would be the question,
That would be the
if this
question
is
then.
your area, Trevor, you would be asked, the questions. If it's federal pass-through, don't spend any time on them, but this is, right? Or should we?
Yes, and given the sort of circumstances that we're in, it
That's
couldn't
true.
hurt to get a, general idea of what it is in case
Right.
there is a change in the federal funding streams.
That's true. And in this case, there's only 6 grants. So it's easy to have a conversation about all of them. That isn't necessarily true in parts of human services where there's 400 grants.
And sometimes,
Actually, Dave knows what they all are.
Stop.
sometimes they're a big number, right? Like, and I think what we were looking at yesterday with DIVA, right?
Right.
The payment to Medicaid providers, right, isn't broken out by who we think is gonna bill and what services, right? This is what we need to make Medicaid payments, right? So that's what
So
that
that's not
number
where
is.
you'd spend your time, even though it says $900 million, because we know what that is. But a lot of these other ones we don't. So,
For the ones that are. on those-
but people have been asking, you guys have been asking, like, how do we know and how do we find out? Well, this is a way to find out about what's in there. So that is your other charge. But if you can get into grants, if they have them, not every department's gonna have them, right?
Yeah, not everybody has grants.
Right.
My orchestra probably don't have any grants.
Yeah, exactly. So, and those small ones, like, we're not worried about the cultural ones, the, the Ethics Commission, the Human Rights Commission. It's mostly government agencies that we want to take a look at. So that's part 2 of your homework, is to look through those and then follow up as needed with folks. Is this starting to make sense about how to look through these things?
So we want to look for stuff that's not on this.
Right, exactly.
We want a bigger.
Yes.
I want a one spreadsheet.
Right. I don't think we're gonna get that far, but we want a bigger list. We wanna know, we kind of know what the universe is. A committee asks, advocate asks. What we don't know is really the governor's wish list and his
They're already
asking.
embedded.
Right.
It's only a-
Right, but we don't know what's embedded, so we need to do a little research about that, so we understand what that is. And then part 3 is gonna be your homework for the weekend, so I don't have this to give you now. It depends on your portfolio, how much of a headache you're gonna have. Well, no, because part 3, everybody's gonna be involved, no matter what your budget area is. If we get these numbers, most of them, maybe not the grants, but if we get the vision numbers, the ups and downs to Maria by tomorrow morning. Before we leave tomorrow afternoon, you'll have that wish list and you'll have probably a bit of a culled down version of the 300 million. Because we already know some committees have said medium, we know, we know some, so we can make it a shorter list of that. And I'm gonna ask you to think about where you're gonna find $20 million. And if you have $20 million, where you want to spend and you'll have those lists.
That's for the homework.
Like by morning?
Tomorrow morning, over the weekend.
But we know tomorrow, that's what I'm saying, is that's tomorrow. And so you'll have,
Okay,
you'll have the government base,
base number.
it'll be one time. We'll also have a one-time list.
So new base items for the list. What else?
Check grants.
Check grants.
You may not have a lot in your portfolio. And I'll be around, Emily's around, Maria's around. I can help you with, you know, some of you have bigger, the AHS stuff and the housing stuff may be the biggest too. And so I'm happy to help. I seriously, I can go through some of these too, I don't, you know, but you all have your own portfolio, you can go through this, and then you'll have lists of, you know, the governor's wish list is the stuff that's in the budget, so that's where you'd have to cut. And you don't get to spend 20 million unless you cut 20 million, and you can only cut 2 million, you can spend 2 million.
So, if I could give an example of this. For example, in the liquor and lottery, which is not flagged here, there's a 1.8 million one-time appropriation essentially for. If that wasn't spent, I'm not suggesting.
Right.
The enterprise fund would generate 1.8 million more for the general. Follow what I'm saying? So that is general fund money in a roundabout way.
And so that could go on a wish list.
It
Doesn't mean we're gonna take it off.
I know, but I'm just saying, that's why it.
That's what funds can be.
Because. Or like in the fish and wildlife, backfilling it out, because there isn't enough money.
Right, so they're spending more in grants, maybe they're spending more in grants than they are taking in fees. And now we're backfilling that with general fund, which shows you need to give all those grants, are those grant programs making this up, are they 20 years old and nobody's ever said,
Depends on what they are.
it's just a guy sitting at the access station. I don't know what they do, but you know, that's ridiculous. I don't want to get myself too far in a hole by saying the wrong thing, but checking this stuff out a little bit more, so. Is this starting to make sense? Yeah. So then we're gonna know, we'll have a better idea, because if you do this over the weekend, and then what I'm gonna ask you to do is share that information with Maria. And she'll keep track anonymously of where, you know, we can find money and where we want to spend the money. And then we get a sense of this committee's priorities. So if one person says, I think all the money, you know, we should double ADS and do $30 million, and nobody else says it, then it may not be a top of the list priority for this committee. But if there's some things that 8 people say that they all think that we should do X, Y, Z thing. And it may be that we're all over the map, I have no idea where we're gonna cut.
Well, what, so you want us to like, put, I think that there are issues in anybody else's portfolio, or just in my portfolio?
No, it's everybody. This is everybody. This is the shared responsibility for the budget, not,
But it is part, that's more democratic. However. If it's not our budget area, we don't necessarily have a good understanding of some of the nuances, so you can't just. We don't legislate by polls.
Whoa.
hopefully we have some sort, but you can also ask another, if you say, this one, I don't really understand, you know, why should I consider this, or why, you know, so you talk to each other.
So we start with our budget area. Start looking at other.
What you have to do for your budget areas is go through the vision.
I understand
and,
that.
that's right, and then the grants. And then we'll have a list that everybody will get of the wish list and all the budget asks and the committee asks.
And from there.
And then
we'll discuss.
there, you take the governor's side, because that's the stuff that's in the budget, right? And say,
What do you-
what are you gonna cut? And for every dollar you cut, you get to spend something on this other list over here. If you don't cut anything and you just like it the way it is, then you're done.
Easy.
And if you find more, you can do, but the goal is to aim for 20 million.
We're gonna have the same box.
Right,
Yeah, I guess.
no new box. And I'll be around to continue to answer questions, and Emily will be here today.
Are you voting?
I'll put in something anonymously. I need to put in something, I don't know, maybe member.
Anonymously.
It's anonymous, we're gonna give it to Maria, and she's gonna have 11 columns. It's not gonna say, yay.
We're all gonna get, the applicants are all gonna be reached out to.
You're gonna be all over the weekend with your phone off.
Sit down in the sunshine in front of the lake.
Only on Saturday, but not on Sunday. It's gonna rain on Sunday. And just.
Yeah, what, 70
Well, I
on
would suggest that
Saturday?
you start looking at your ups and downs here. Now,
This
if you wanna give these tomorrow morning.
Yeah, this is, I'm just gonna add.
Right. So, okay?
I got a
Question?
Yes, David?
So I've been, these Vantage reports.
Yeah?
There's one, if I'm understanding, it says all organizations, so I'm thinking, oh, they've rolled it up statewide. And then underneath, presume are the departments. So, gee, we spent over $2 million on office supplies last year. You know, we spent money on photography, and money composting, snow removal, every little thing you can
I don't
imagine
know where you're looking. That sounds interesting.
is in there. So I said, well, assuming somebody tells me that it is statewide, or it's one big department, if I said, gee, I want to cut office supplies by 0.5%, what's 0.5% on 2 million? 10,000? Add it to the, but that would be cutting office supplies across all of state government, not my portfolio.
Right.
I could, then if I could find my portfolio, I could go to, carrying this out, I could go to Diva. Say, Diva spent whatever, $45,000 on office supplies. Can they get by with 40,000? I feel like that's
And that's going into more detail than I'm thinking of.
okay,
I'm thinking of using the ups and downs.
gotcha. Yep, stay there.
Stay there, and then grants. Okay.
All right.
Grants just in the ups and downs or
No,
grants?
grants in the Vantage report, like you just looked at.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
Feel a
So
little
what
bit
I'm gonna
like
do is
Elon.
we'll go off live. We'll all be around to discuss further and help out, but that's what the assignment is. Okay? And tomorrow morning, we are going to vote on page 219 at 9:15. 9:15, we'll vote on page 219, that was the one we have today. And then we're gonna hear at 9:30, Katie Lynn's coming in to do H218, which is the opioid settlement proposal. We are not gonna vote on that tomorrow. We're just gonna vote on H219.